Welcome to the chaos sector. The trial is being prolonged, and we know why. The defense requested the prosecution to provide evidence before the court, and that has not happened. I'm assuming one of the most important pieces of evidence would be surveillance of his vehicle near the home. As you know, almost a year has passed, and everything but that surveillance has been released. From body cam footage months prior to the murders to body cam footage of various parties. Yet, no surveillance of Kohberger driving back and forth in that neighborhood. Can't we just get at least a screenshot of surveillance near the home? The prosecution won't even provide Kohberger's defense team this surveillance. Some may say it's because they don't want them to wiggle out of the evidence with an explanation. But, if you have your murderer, there is nothing his defense team can do, right? They have his DNA at the home, they have his cell phone records tracked to and from the home, and they have his vehicle spotted near the home on that night. And even have his vehicle spotted near the home months prior. Case closed, he's a dead man, right? Show the defense team what their client is guilty of, let him soak in his guilt, drive him crazy, eat him alive, right? Not so fast. Some may see this as strategic cat and mouse tactics, and that's what they want the public to believe. I see a prosecution team that does not have empirical evidence, merely circumstantial evidence. And if you followed the previous series, I don't think they even have circumstantial evidence. This would mainly be the fact that he has a white Hyundai Elantra. Good luck with that. As we've mentioned, we are patiently waiting for the trial to bring the noise. Until then, let's continue with our simulations, shall we? Who is it?
A friend of yours.
I don't know you, so you're not a friend of mine.
A friend that knows you have a private investigation into the Moscow murders. Now can you let me in, or do I need to give you more information?
Are you the FBI? Hello?
Chief Cynthia sent me. You're wasting valuable time. I don't want to continue having this conversation through the door.
All right, I will let you in. But just so you know, I am armed and have cameras in my home.
That's smart on your behalf. Unfortunate the victims didn't have cameras in their home. The students would have thought twice about doing what they did, don't you think?
So this is how you treat your friends? Not polite, you know.
Who are you?
That's not important. Just know that I'm here to help. I was sent by Chief Cynthia, that's all you need to know about me.
So you want to stay unidentified, all right, no problem. What do you know about this investigation? If the chief sent you, then you must have credentials.
Kaylee's sister claimed Jack was 100% innocent, yet Kaylee's mother, on the other hand, felt that it was someone the housemates knew.
We already know that, but you're just gonna ignore everything I asked you?
The sister is essentially sticking her neck out for the ex-boyfriend in a nationally covered case.
Now hold on, you're not gonna just barge into my home and ignore my questions. If you won't cooperate, I'm asking you to leave.
Does this look like a social gathering to you? I am a private investigator. Is that enough?
Well, it's a start. It's about respecting my home, Miss Private Investigator. You can continue.
The sister is essentially sticking her neck out for the ex-boyfriend in a nationally covered case, yet the mother is saying he isn't ruled out because she felt it was someone the housemates knew. Although she also stated Jack is innocent and would never do such a horrific thing, it's more about cooling the flames that were fanned about him prior. Meaning, so many people had accused him of the murders that the mother would attempt to quiet that noise. Yet, she did state she felt it was someone the housemates knew. Now let's put this into perspective, from the mother's view. Kaylee was leaving Moscow, she was moving to another state. The family knew this, the family also knew that Kaylee and Jack were not taking that trip together. He is the ex-boyfriend, his ex-girlfriend is found murdered merely 3 weeks from their breakup, never answered or returns any of her calls, has access to a white Hyundai Elantra, stayed close to the victim's home. I mean, shit, what else can one do to prove that they are a primary suspect?
Okay, hold on, you're rambling a bit. Why didn't you just drop off a document or something? This is quite tacky if you ask me.
Let me finish. The mother instinctively suspected Jack, but of course, won't publicly say this. This is why she stated, she felt it was someone they knew. In context, if it was someone they knew, this more than likely meant this person is from Moscow. And more so, even within the circle of university students. If we zone in on the immediate circle of friends of that group, there isn't any evidence of turmoil that would justify such a grudge. But a broken-hearted ex who knew the love of his life was leaving forever could hold a grudge. The mother would believe this, so we know the sister would also believe this, and the father. I took a look at the autopsy report, and it states that Kaylee suffered far more severe stab wounds than her housemates. More severe wounds, alongside Madison and 2 other victims downstairs, indicates a specific attack towards Kaylee. And if the killer had a grudge, such as an obsession, they would take their pain out on Kaylee, you understand?
Okay, we're on the same page with that theory. So what do you make of this Koberger individual? Wouldn't he have a similar motive? I mean, his phone pinged in that area several times, which has him leaving Moscow and returning to Pullman. Wouldn't he be the likely suspect based on this evidence?
According to who? The Moscow Police Department? Are you kidding me?
Now wait, I'm not saying he's the killer, but he could have been in Moscow that night. If he was, and he also has a white Hyundai Elantra, he needs to be listed as a suspect. I mean, this is a strong possibility.
Listen, we can go in circles, or we can track the killers. Koberger's cell phone can ping from miles away, that's common. And his vehicle, being spotted in surveillance, hasn't been proven to exist by your department. Furthermore, there are several white Hyundai Elantras driving around in Moscow as we speak. And one of them is literally across the street from the victim's home, and an ex-boyfriend had access to this vehicle. Which one makes more sense to you? A white Hyundai Elantra from another state with an unproven motive, or a white Hyundai Elantra in the state and directly associated with one of the victims and has a clear motive? If I were a detective, I know who I'm bringing in for interrogation.
I don't disagree, but in our line of work, we have to look at all possibilities. So, you believe it was the ex-boyfriend, and the other 3 victims were caught in the middle?
Let me continue. Let's touch on what the family of Jack claimed regarding the accusations against him. Jack's aunt claimed, quote, well, paraphrasing, he couldn't be the killer. Both families expected Jack and Kaylee to get back together and go on to get married, unquote. Well, it was Kaylee who apparently called it off. This would destroy everything that was planned, which could be devastating to Jack's future. Kaylee, on the other hand, seemed to be able to move on, as she literally was moving on to another state. Perhaps she felt something was a bit off with Jack and decided to leave and get away from her crazy ex who stalked her. I don't like Rumorville, but we have to peek into it just a bit to tie some loose ends up. It is rumored that Jack, the ex-boyfriend, Jack number 2, Adam, who was a bartender, Dylan, and Bethany were all cool with each other. In the surveillance of Kaylee and Madison coming back from the bar where Adam bartended, Kaylee asked Madison, quote, what did you tell Adam? And Madison responds saying, I told Adam everything, unquote.
Okay, we got that.
Now the first question would be, what is the significance of this information that Madison told Adam? In that surveillance, and the grub truck surveillance, Jack number 2 was accompanying the girls. Initially, we cleared him based on not observing any real suspicious behavior from him. He appeared calm, just seemed to be watching over the girls, as they had been drinking prior at the bar. But now, it looks more like he perhaps lured them to that bar, where of course, his buddy Adam bartended. What Madison told Adam is left up for the imagination, we can't know what she revealed to him. But the fact that Jack number 2 is friends with the ex-boyfriend, Adam the bartender, Dylan and Bethany, we can only suggest that the information is linked to their murders. Perhaps Adam had slipped drugs into their drinks, which would be used to sedate them later that night. And Jack number 2 was to watch their behavior, their reaction to the drugs, to make sure the plan will be successful later on.
Let's slow down a bit, because you've presented a theory that needs to be analyzed. First off, Jack number 2 would be the so-called hawk who is watching Kaylee and Madison, I'm with you. Second, Jack number 2, Adam, Dylan, Bethany, and Jack the ex-boyfriend are all friends. What you're telling me is Jack, the ex-boyfriend, had planned to kill his ex-girlfriend because he didn't want to lose her as she was leaving Moscow. Adam was in on it, drugged Kaylee and Madison. Madison revealed something to Adam, which Kaylee didn't approve of, perhaps because it involved Jack, the ex-boyfriend. Later that night, Kaylee and Madison called Jack, the ex-boyfriend, to resolve something. But he never answered the phone. He didn't want to hear from Kaylee that night, nor her best friend. The boiling point had reached its limit, and soon after those calls of attempting to plead with Jack, the ex-boyfriend, fell on deaf ears, and they were murdered soon after. Do I have this correct?
Impressive, but there is something missing in your analysis.
What could it be then?
I believe Kaylee and Madison didn't attempt to call Jack. That was the alibi. The killers made calls to Jack to create the narrative that they couldn't get in touch with him due to being asleep, of course. So, yeah, they were already dead. This would be around 2:40 in the morning. They had to make it appear that Kaylee and Madison were alive by making several calls from 2:40 a.m. to 3 a.m. The more calls that were made, the more it appears Jack was unfortunately asleep, you understand?
That's an interesting take and very logical. I'm assuming you believe Xana never received her DoorDash delivery neither, or was on TikTok. Perhaps they were murdered almost simultaneously, you think?
There were multiple killers, so yeah, it's possible. Both floors had to be strategically approached, no loose ends to escape. One person is not capable of doing this, no matter how much help they would get from the inside. But if those multiple killers had that same help from the inside, well, it's virtually impossible for an escape. Which brings me to those housemates. Dylan and Bethany. It took housemates to comply with the plan. This is why they arrived home earlier. In the police report, by your so-called captain, it gives location, the time, and name of where the victims were that night. But when mentioning Dylan and Bethany, it states, quote, at 1 a.m., the two surviving roommates returned from other places in the community and did not wake up for some time, unquote. Other places in the community, yeah, that doesn't sound suspicious.
I'm guessing other places is alluding to a party, but apparently that was too difficult to prove.
As detective investigating a murder case, you don't release such a vague statement about the survivor's whereabouts. Unless those whereabouts may lead to suspicious activity prior to their arrival back home. Now, we both know the captain knows exactly where they were, but doesn't disclose their location. This is because they were not at a party that night. They couldn't party, they had to stay sober, they had to focus on the task at hand. They were at an unidentified location, conspiring with the ex-boyfriend and the rest of the vengeful students. Kaylee ruined Jack's plans. He was humiliated for his fraternity to see. This would not go unpunished. In that society of fraternities and sororities, your social status means everything. Jack's social status had been crushed. He was on top of the world with a young blonde by his side, then everything came crashing down as she decided to move on. Maybe it was simply a case of outgrowing each other, or maybe he started showing signs of anger, jealousy, insecurities, even obsessive behavior. She felt it was best to move on. I believe he was 26 years old, and that made it even harder to stomach.
The chief also believes this. Many may claim he is 22 years old. But why did the age of 26 years old come about in those articles? They had everything else correct. How do you get the age wrong? Something is fishy with that.
There's a saying I like to apply here. When there's mystery, there's secrecy, and when there's secrecy, there's conspiracy. There shouldn't be a significant 4-year age difference with the ex-boyfriend, who you obviously have a lot of information about. You knew they were together for 5 years, yet don't know his real age? Impossible, because the same source that informed you about the relationship would inform you about both students' age. So you know, it's a conspiracy. A younger female, who had saw him as her knight in shining armor as a teenager, was venturing out into a more mature life. Both families had envisioned the marriage, the grandchildren, a great success story for generations to come. But Kaylee was not sold on the idea anymore, if at all. She didn't submit to the future plans anymore, or if at all. Realizing that maybe that relationship had reached its end. 5 years was long enough, it's time to move on. Not so fast, young lady, I call the shots around here. Kaylee reaches out to Jack, hoping he could let it go. I envision her texting Jack at the food truck, trying to work things out. By telling him respectfully and genuinely she is not in love with him anymore and feel they both need to go their separate ways. She tried to enjoy herself and spend time with her friends that night. Attempting to block out the disgruntled ex, Kaylee tries to enjoy the final night with her friends at the home before starting a new life. But he kept texting her, making it difficult to enjoy the night. Imagine dealing with this type of person when they stay right down the street from you. That could be nerve-wracking.
That would be impossible to deal with. You wouldn't be able to reconcile, so it becomes a very hostile relationship between the two. One is moving on, while the other is trying to cling to the back of their shirt. I guess the only way to deal with it, even for one night, is to force yourself to have fun with your best friend.
Madison was caught up in the drama as she's Kaylee's best friend. And in some cases, the best friend is considered the reason a breakup happens. So Jack could have had a grudge against Madison as well. A best friend to the end, I guess. It was too late, and he knew she was leaving for good. But he wouldn't let that happen, so she is murdered right alongside her best friend. The morning after, Jack doesn't arrive at the home with the other friends that came over. Surely, he would be devastated that his ex-girlfriend had been murdered, right? He knew not to come near that home. The frequency of his guilt would swallow the entire home with anger. But he did show compassion. Not the compassion of being notified Kaylee had been killed and jumps in his car or walks over to the home, however you want to depict it. No, he goes to rescue the dog from the animal shelter. Aw, that's so sweet of you, Jack. You had enough compassion to get the dog, but not enough compassion to arrive at the home the morning the victims were found deceased? Dylan surely would call you as well, right, Jack? After all, you are the ex-boyfriend for 5 years, right, Jack? Let me guess, you were still sleeping from 2:40 in the morning past 12 p.m. later Sunday, right, Jack? If people think Kaylee and Madison were physically calling him, he could have rescued them instead of the dog. And this guy created an Instagram account for the dog? Guess this is his way of showing he loved the dog more. Yeah, I see the sick mind. Kaylee never gave you an Instagram account like me, Murph. She didn't love neither one of us. She never loved you like I love you. And if we look deeper, it's like a mockery of Murphy as well, because it can't tell the world what happened, yet Jack will plaster the dog on social media for the world to see. A very disturbed individual. And I'm supposed to believe some loner in Pullman, Washington is the culprit?
Shit, I'm baffled. It was unbelievable. I'm so taken aback, I don't know where to begin.
How about you keep investigating? Listen, you know this investigation isn't going to end well. I have more information if you would like me to share it with you. Despite your lack of hospitality.
I'll bypass the sarcasm. I think this is a lot to dig into for now. My teammates are assisting in this investigation. I'll inform them about what you've revealed to me.
Would that be Detective John and Detective Joe? They were the ones who bombarded the witnesses, right? Pathetic.
That's not how it happened, and you know it. They almost got the girls to confess. I would say they did more than any detective in the department could ever do. We see what has transpired since then. You should thank them. If it weren't for those interviews, you might not be standing here right now. Show some respect, young lady.
There are several ways to skin a cat. They didn't have the only way, you know. The girls would have cracked eventually. It didn't matter who was assigned to the case. Truth doesn't have an arbiter, it simply exists. But don't be so uptight, I was only joking.
You sure seem a bit, well, desensitized as a private investigator. How about you cut the dark and edgy persona and take things a bit more seriously? That way, you won't come off as…
So now that we're finished here, you should expect an email tomorrow. It will contain information about the alleged suspect in Coburger. Also, there are a few video examinations of the surveillance footage from the night of the murders. Oh, and you wanted to know who I was? Let's just say I'm close to Chief Cynthia.
Wait a minute, you're the daughter she mentioned, right?
An eager lion can be severely injured trying to hunt a zebra. My mother taught me this lesson when I was younger. We came to America when I was 17 years old, but I was learning English very well as a kid. She wanted me to adapt to American culture and not feel alienated here. She is a very proud woman who worked hard to give me a better life. She told me my father had moved to another country because she didn't want me to know the truth. For years I'd asked, will I ever see him again? She told me no, he's probably living another life somewhere. It hurt, but then she told me the truth. I was devastated, thinking he was still alive somewhere. But she taught me to keep my emotions in check, never let them get the best of me. So, you may see it as being cold, I see it as being cautious.
No hard feelings, you're rough around the edges, but it gives you a distinct texture. When the texture is too smooth, how do you know it's real? We need rough edges, that's how we know something is real, because we can feel it. But I thank you for everything you have shared with me. And I thank your mother, or Chief Cynthia, to be respectful.
It's not a problem. She wants me to call her Chief Cynthia, even outside of work. You have my respect, and I anticipate you all will finish triumphant. Till next time, la revedere. It means goodbye in Romania.
All right, Private Detective Chief's daughter, goodbye.
The name is Elena.
The guys are gonna freak out when I tell them this. She doesn't have the same strong accent, though. She definitely has the same stubborn attitude, that's for sure. It must have been hard losing her father so tragically. Well, she gave me more insight into what I suspected anyway. This is the Chaos Sector.